Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Susan Purney Mark. I'm a textile and surface design artist living and working on Pender Island, part of the Southern Gulf Islands, close by. And to begin, I'd just like to pay acknowledgement to the land on which we're living and working and playing, and particularly acknowledge the mothers, sisters, aunties, and cousins, because this installation project really is a feminine and a female focus. So thank you very much. And I want to sort of talk about a little bit of the very beginning of my career, and then talk a little bit about how this grouping came to be, and sort of take you on the journey, and then also introduce you to some of the concepts that I've been working on here. So I started off 40 years ago or so as a traditional quilter. I've always worked primarily in textiles. I came from a strong background with women in my family of sewing and some quilting, lots of different textile arts. And at the beginning it was more traditional work, but in the last 25 years or so I've really focused on contemporary work, but again, mostly wall pieces, mostly 2D. And this is a departure for me working in 3D. And so it has its own set of challenges and different ways that you have to approach it, different thinking as well. So the whole journey started, my husband and I were in Crete I was doing a residency in the capital, and he came back, he'd been to the museum, and he came back with some photos of pottery urns and vessels and containers from the museum. And I started doing some sketching and some printing of those, and I really started to look at the shape and the form of these, and seeing, in ancient, almost before time, how vessels really incorporated a female form. And there is evidence, certainly in the museums and places that we visited, that it was very often interpreted as a part of goddess worship, but also putting female parts onto the vessels, breasts, pubic areas, butt muscles, and so that voluptuousness, the roundedness of the pieces I found really to be quite intriguing. And yet I looked at what I had been doing and realized that it really wasn't suited to a 2D format to be hung on the wall. I really wanted to work in 3D and to figure out how to shape these pieces that was incorporated that feminine, but were also just an interesting, interactive kind of approach. And being textile, I started focusing on how I could use textiles. So I started out very small. You can see some smaller pieces down in those at another residency that I was doing, and partly because we were traveling and I kept the pieces small because of the conflicts of shipping things back and so on. And so once I got home and realized that I could work out a form that incorporated an infrastructure, a structure inside that would hold them up, keep them from collapsing. So, there's always the practical aspects tied in with all the artistic aspects as well. And so I thought I wanted to develop that feminine partly because all the politics that has been happening in the last few years, the the conflicts around gender identity and the empowerment of women, and that seems to be in so many ways being degraded rather than being improved upon. So I decided to approach it from the idea of the larger vessels being more of an attribute or a circumstance or a way that we live in the world, and give some voice to people who have no voice or that are kept from speaking up and being heard and being respected. And so I initially started with the large piece as my focus as water. So when you consider that water is the beginning of life, without water there is no life. The idea that when we were in Sardinia, a lot of the early civilizations there were concerned with water worship. There were sacred springs, sacred wells that we visited. And even today, there are worship, not really services, but a gathering place at these springs by women to be involved with ritual and to celebrate. So this was the water piece, and so I wanted the waves. I always like to incorporate words with my work, and you can see that it certainly is a strong component in what I do. And so I stitched these words, some symbolism, and early on I was looking at how I could use my thoughts and my concepts in symbols. And certainly there's lots of ancient symbols, but I wanted also to bring it about into more contemporary symbols and what exists today that is that universal kind of language that people understand, which is really symbols. And so that was the water piece. And then I really thought I wanted the water to be the focus, but also the understanding of birth through to death. So the next piece is, this one was my birth piece. And I wanted also to have both the interior and the exterior of the vessels to be connected. And so I would often print words on the fabric that goes on the interior. The birth one is the head crowning, in sort of just before the infant comes into the world. And then words that were about being contained, about being held, about being safe in the womb. And so that was the piece that I wanted. And so I'll come back to the whole way through the life, but from birth, but the one down below there is meant to be death, and the concept of it being a linen shroud. We're wrapped in linen or fabric after death, but the vessel is broken. It's been broken apart because we're no longer here. So I've stitched the words, "I am not here," through that, and so it has collapsed and is open now. Another piece that I felt was really important, particularly in the last few months, was reproductive choice. So another vessel is this one here, and so much of our media focuses on the choices in the United States, and we're all familiar with Roe versus Wade and it being overturned and women losing so much of the choices of control over their bodies. So I did a little bit of research because Roe versus Wade is unique to the United States. The fact that they have lost the ability to choose is not unique to them. So I did some investigation into what steps along the way gave women in Canada more choice. And so it's a little hard to see, but in there it's Dr. Emily Stowe, who probably not many people know is the first doctor to be charged with providing abortion services. And this was in the early 1900s, so 150 years ago. She was convicted but served no time or didn't have her license taken away. More recent proponents of reproductive choice, and he was initially convicted but ultimately paved the way for a lot more choice in what women have today in Canada. There is the, I'm just looking, Statute 7 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms was also the pivot point where women's rights were entrenched into our historical document of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So those are all Canadian aspects of what we live through all around the world. So that one, and also I tried to find symbols of different ways of approaching these aspects. So that's probably well known as an IUD, which is a contraceptive device. So those are some of the aspects. I just want to move back over here if I can and talk about some of the other ones. And what I'm finding with this project is it's going to be ongoing. It's going to grow because the more we talk and interact and have conversations, the more things come to mind, come to our understanding. So one of the vessels, the one in the center, I wanted to address the murdered and missing Indigenous women and understand that this is an ongoing issue that so many women, not just in Canada, but all around the world, face, that they disappear or they're lost, they're taken away by force from their loved ones and their families. And so we may know the red dress but the significance of the red dress being an important recognition for women. The ribbons on it are to mimic the ribbon skirts that many of the Indigenous women wear in ceremonies and other times. And then in the interior, I've put in daughter, mother, sister, cousin, auntie to understand the relationships that these women have in their lives with one another and with their families and the interconnectedness. The one on the left has to do with our reproductive cycle, and I've titled it Menses. And so without menstruation, there would be no life. And as much as maybe we tend to talk about it in maybe a derogatory or a negative way, it really is a celebration of life. And so there's a little drop of blood there on the exterior with some arrows going around in a circle to understand that it's an ongoing cycle. And I also stitched some of the words that we have used in the past to denote menstruation. So there's menses, there's lunations, because of course we're connected to the earth through that moon cycle of lunations. There's red week, which I think is an older term, and there's a couple of other words in there. One of the ones that I did some research, I had some books to talk about women in history, but women in different civilizations or cultures throughout time. And so I was looking at, there was a part that was dealing with the indigenous people in South America being disappeared, and the protests that were going on with the restrictive governments to take people away, and they're just simply gone. The next one I had, which is the one to deal with FGM, I really struggled with. It's just, when you think about the concept of female genital mutilation, it's just so horrific and so wrong that people these young girls who have no choice, who have no understanding of what they are, what they're forced to endure, it just kind of chokes me up. But also to give them a voice, the interior just repeatedly says no, no, no. And in the bottom, if you have a look, I've also printed, please stop, giving these young girls a voice to say that this is so, so wrong. So let me talk about the other aspect of what I wanted to do with this project. Was with the smaller pieces, I wanted the whole aspect, the whole vision here to look as though it had been an archaeological dig that had just been taken up, and the archaeologists are discovering all these vessels in different ways of sort of the way they lay, the way they are arranged, and so on. But I also wanted a community involvement for women to participate in this installation. And so I had these vessels, these smaller pots, and can you just hand me that one there? No, that one, yeah. So I had these small pots, and I've got probably about 20 or so of them. And I wanted the women to put words on. So you'll walk around and you'll see different words stitched onto pieces of fabric and then attached to the vessels. So I gathered a group of women on Pender Island where I live, and I wanted to have some structure to it. So I gave them pieces of paper that gave them an age. So it would be, I am 23, I am 68, I am 94, I am 3 months old. And I asked them to reflect on perhaps what their memory was, if they could, or just a word that might spring to mind when we talk about that certain age. And so each of the vessels were sort of a time period of 5 to 10 years, and I stitched the appropriate or the connected words onto the vessels. And so that was some fun community involvement. It got us talking. It got women together who maybe didn't know each other. And I think that was sort of the underpinning of my thought process on how this project involves the women. And it builds on community, it builds on relationships and our understanding of how we are, how we think, and ultimately the power and strength that we do have as women. So these are all different. Now I want to talk about for a moment some of the fabric that I've used, and this is all used fabric, mostly table linens. So you think about grandma's white tablecloth that never gets used. I was gifted many tablecloths, and so I dyed them using a variety of different colors, but something earthy, terracotta looking, and wrapped these around the vessels and fastened them in place. Inside, so one of the things that I early on struggled with was how to create the inside structure so that it would be fairly stable, it wouldn't collapse. Early pieces collapsed under the weight of being too large. So the larger pieces had to get more and more structure inside in order to be stable. So I tried wire grid, I tried different kinds of wire, and eventually settled on plaster bandages. So that was the structure. So I used a glass vase on these, built the plaster bandages around. Once it was dry, I took it off, I sealed it, and then added the textile as well. And one of the reasons why I wanted to use the linens was how connected they are to us as women, as traditional, connectedness to the home and to the kitchen and to the laundry, all through history. We're born into textile. We emerge, and one of the first things that happens is the baby is wrapped up in cloth. And in the end, we're wrapped in cloth again at the end. So there's that connectedness to fabric that we have all through our lives. And so that's one of the approaches I wanted to work with. Can you hand me the other pieces there for a minute? And hold on to that one. Thank you. So these were some of the other approaches that I tried early on, was smaller pieces, and you can see some of them down there. And each of them has another word and symbol stitched onto them. So one is nourish, one is resilience. And if I look online and say, what is a symbol for female genital mutilation? There actually is symbols. Who would have thought about that? So these are other pieces, and as well as being gifted by other women with fabric, this fabric is actually a baking cloth, right? From your bakery. This is my son. And so he gave me the linen that was no longer usable in the bakery, and I've dyed it and stitched on it. One of the other things that I initially thought, and I'm probably going to go back to it, was a different approach of using some sort of form and then adding both paper that's on the inside and fabric, but with wire on there, and it gives a much more relaxed form. I just enjoy the way you can look at it from different sides, and this one in a similar way with wire as well. So these were, while they were initial experiments, they were also something that I enjoyed doing, and I'll probably go back to creating them in some aspect. But for now, I want to build on the installation. I want to have much more to say in that. And so in that respect, I'm going back. And what I have, and I would like you to take a piece of paper. I'll pass that around. Men are welcome to as well. There's a piece of fabric on each. So you take a piece of fabric, piece of paper, and it'll give you an age, and you can stitch some words on it, whatever you like. And then I also have envelopes for you to mail them back to me. So I will continue to add other people's thoughts and voices to the project that I'm working on. This is the first sort of opening for this project. And so I'm hoping as I build on it and create more vessels, that it'll continue to expand. And also I am applying to other exhibitions in different places. So you take that. I'll hold on to this because people might like to hold on to it. I put an interior inside because I wanted to close off the plaster in the interior as well. So this one will get other words put onto it. Any questions? I've been talking, but anybody have any thoughts or questions?
It's amazing.
There's so much. Yeah, there's so much to explore. And I think, one other thing that I wanted to mention that made an impact on me. We were in a museum in Tuscany, and it was an Etruscan museum. The Etruscans were an early civilization of about around 2000 to 1500 BC. And there was a little pot in there, and it had been inscribed, and the translation was, "I am a gift," and then it said to so and so and so. And what struck me was the personification of that little pot. And it is an I, it's not a thing. It has that persona. And I thought, wow, that's pretty powerful to give a voice to an inanimate object. That really struck me quite deeply. So it was just something that I sort of carry in my mind when I'm creating these, that each of these could have that aspect of being something other than just hard. Yeah, Corey.
When you invited your friends in your community into stitching for it as well, was the stitching totally new for them, or were they already involved with textiles? And what was it like for those who it was their first time ever looking at textiles?
Yeah, and some of them were very comfortable with their stitching, and others were, I can't sew. And I said, look, here's what you do. It's just this stitch. And I gave them little pens to mark their word. And there was no direction or anything as to what their word could be. And so I gave them free rein. Here's the age, just use your imagination. And some of them were really moving. I didn't particularly ask them for their stories or an explanation, but I know in some case, there was one that she didn't say anything to me, but she has stage 4 breast cancer, and her age was something like 84, and she had written, "Stitched unlikely." And I thought, oh wow, that's pretty incredible, pretty amazing. So yeah, and so it was really, I didn't care how they looked. I wasn't going to vet any kind of workmanship on them. I just wanted them to feel free to do that. And people have really mentioned several times how much they enjoyed that. I had intended for a second get-together with a slightly different theme, but I think weather interfered, so I had to cancel it. But I'm hoping that I can gather other groups in other places to add to this as well. So.
There's some of the other words.
Oh, this larger one was, I'd been reading some stuff, and it was to do with other violence or ways that negative things are inflicted on us. And so that one is not a cheerful one, but in the end, the interior says, I will survive, meaning that even I'm strong enough, or my community is strong enough to overcome those things. And so some of them are, let's see, broken, resilient, honest, healthy, worn. So, some as we get older and age, then it's things like slower or ending or things like that are a little bit of a different thought process in there. So you're welcome to sort of have a look around and see what other words that you can come up with as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions. So I can give you an envelope if you want to participate in this. I would love to receive things back.
I had one other question about just your thoughts on using craft, and in this case textile, as a medium to protest and also to make change, and just any comments on that?
Actually, it's interesting because I do a lecture called Sacred Cloth, and it has to do with different faith groups and how they use textiles. But it's also about how we express ourselves, and things like, banners, suffragettes, 150 years ago, stitched banners to march in parades, or banners in different cultural aspects. That fabric has always been used to give a voice, even within not even necessarily stitched, but within woven textiles, and it's an art form that I think is as old as time. You think back a few thousand years where a woven pattern had a message of some sort within it, whether it was invoking a spirit or asking for protection, the different symbols in that. It's all connected over time. Good. Thank you.